Hello and welcome to the Providence College podcast. I'm Michael Hagan from the class of 2015, and I'm joined by producer Chris Judge from the class of 2005. Our guest today is Daniel Carrero, a senior from the class of 2023 who recently returned from a semester abroad at the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. Daniel is from Lawrence, Massachusetts. He majors in philosophy and creative writing, and he has recently completed a book of short fiction. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you decided to study philosophy and creative writing.
Yeah, so it pretty much just starts at a very young age. I grew up around a lot of hip-hop influenced people. I grew up around a lot of people who were interested in music in general, and I think music was the initial introduction, primarily rap music. Around 13, I committed myself to being a SoundCloud rapper. I did that for about 6 years and was like, all right, I'll go to college. But along the way, I met a lot of different people, got involved in a lot of different groups, got involved in a lot of different organizations. I also did a lot of youth activism, so that brought me to a place called Elevated Thought. I worked for them for a few years, besides being a member as a student there. But anyways, they were the real introduction to philosophy, and they were also a deeply creative space. So we were always writing poetry. There was always art on the walls, people doing art, people doing different types of social activism, things like that. And, I was an employee for them during my gap year. I graduated high school in 2018, and that's why I'm now class of 2023. And during that gap year, I did a lot of different things for them. And really found sort of a niche in doing different types of philosophical workshops, and also doing different types of creative writing workshops. So, when I got to college, it was pretty easy to pick my majors and stuff.
So you came in declared philosophy?
So I came in declared creative writing. I was still kind of iffy on philosophy because I had a lot of trepidations. Doing philosophy kind of in real life is different than doing it in academia. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. But I took my first philosophy class. I think it was an intro to philosophy. It was during the summer. I did a program called Friars Foundations here at PC. And it was so hard. I got a B+, and this dude just kind of stood there at the table and at the head of the table and, talked for 3 hours. And it was... my brain boiled for those 3 hours every time we sat in that classroom. But I walked out and I was like, I still really like this. You know what I mean? So it was one of those things that despite the struggle, I still really found joy in it, and I found, that reward and stimulation. So.
Yeah, I'd say if you can listen to something for 3 hours continuously and still be interested in it afterwards, I mean, that might be the discipline for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did your academic path, you came in declared creative writing, you picked up philosophy. Tell me a little bit about how that path led you to Oxford.
Oh, Lord. So I guess it kind of starts back in high school. I was sort of an average student, I think. And I didn't really try very hard. And I still did pretty well. And then I got to PC. I should also kind of say it was a low-performing school, so, our resources were low. Things were kind of weird, you know what I mean? So when we got to PC, I felt unprepared, but also I felt like I had a certain aptitude. And, I got here and it was very validating. It was very supportive, and I think that was instrumental, the support systems, and also just feeling comfortable being able to reach out to my professors. And I remember first day of Lit 175, I emailed the professor after class and I'm like, yo, I'm crapping my pants, dude. I don't know what's going on. These people seem so much smarter than me. And then after a while I was like, oh no, we're all kind of lost in ignorance, and just trying to figure it out. But it's different. I never had anybody I knew in my immediate family. I have immediate families who've gone to college, but it's a family relationships are weird. All right,
sure,
we'll leave it at that. So I never really got an impression of what college was like. You know what I mean? So I was petrified, and but the support, the validation, I found myself climbing sort of. Every time I hit a target, I'm like, okay, I can aim a little bit higher now. And little by little, my sophomore year, I'm like, I think I can aim at Oxford. And I was, my guts were turning. I was kind of like, actually, no, I'm lying. My guts were not turning. I was not nervous at all because I also didn't think I was, like, not that I didn't think I was going to get in, but it was sort of like, this is one of those things where if it goes in, it goes in. You know what I mean? So you got to live with whatever result comes about it, because I didn't really know where I was at as a student.
Sure.
You know, got the support. I got in, and I was like, oh crap, okay, now we really got to do this. At a certain point, you know, I was even like, I don't want to go, and then everyone was like, shut the hell up, come on. And you know, I went. I think in my gut, I really wanted to see my ceiling. You know, see what the highest mountain I could climb, and that was, you know, from where I come from, my city. I don't think anybody's ever gone to Oxford. You know what I mean? I know I have a lot of friends who haven't even gone to college. You know what I mean? So it's very rewarding. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, to study in Oxford to study abroad in Oxford is a remarkable achievement. I mean, they don't just let anybody in. It's really rigorous and difficult to achieve it in the first place, and even it's hard once you're there. I mean, tell us a little bit about, you know, the mode of instruction is so different. I mean, tutorials versus courses. Tell us a little bit about that distinction.
Yeah. The tutorial system was incredible. I cherished the one-on-one interaction with the professor even more than I did before, because just that 1 hour a week or that 1 hour every 2 weeks with we call them tutors, we don't call them professors. And we also have to call them by their first names. You know, it's no doctor, whatever. It's, you know, Andre or Thomas or whatever. You know what I mean? It's cool, but you just develop so much. The amount of growth. You know, it's really like an apprenticeship almost. You know, I think that's the best comparison to make. But yeah, I think I was terrified the first day. My philosophy tutor was an extremely confrontational man. We sit down for the first time, and he's just throwing philosophy at me, words like analytical and continental, and I'm like, I don't know what none of this means, dude. And then, you know, kind of just figured it out from there, and I ended up doing really good. So, you know, I'm proud of that, yeah.
For those who are unfamiliar, the tutorial system in Oxford, it's just a different approach to teaching where once a week students will meet with one-on-one, like Daniel said, with a tutor, and they'll present an essay that they've developed over the course of the last week based on a whole list of reading, and present that essay to the tutor, which can be a harrowing experience because they'll lay into you, right?
Yeah, they will. I eventually got them on my I got them on my good side or whatever. The first paper I wrote kind of really impressed them, and from then on it was just a good tone, I think. But I remember other students, you know, like we all got here and stuff, but other professors, other tutors, it was just malarkey. I don't know. I can't really describe it. It's you kind of have to develop a certain, not thick skin, but you get used to it. It's weird. I don't know.
So what was one or two of the most interesting things that you read or studied for a tutorial?
Yeah. Oh, my bad. I do want to backtrack and say
sure.
The tutorials and the tutors are also very wonderful and polite and gentle people. I don't want to give the impression that they're all hard asses and stuff like that. But I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. What were some interesting texts, or just what was the most interesting text or idea or thinker that you encountered in your tutorials?
Yeah. So the philosophy was the biggest one. I think that's why I really went there. We did Kierkegaard and we did Wittgenstein, and I already knew about Kierkegaard. He's kind of one of those dudes that people like to quote in pop culture without much reference, and most of the time it hits, But Wittgenstein is a little more obscure in the popular consciousness.
Hard to drop Wittgenstein quotes in casual conversations.
Yeah. It's really hard to drop them, But Wittgenstein was, I think, the most influential. He was the biggest inspiration. He is sort of what I want to pursue in grad school. I continue researching him, and writing papers on that. And I had always kind of been interested in what he discusses, language, mind, but I've always kind of had a sociological perspective. I was a sociology major for a month. I know it was a semester, but I took the social class, then I did the stats class. And I was like, yeah, this ain't for me. I'm gonna do the word stuff with philosophy and creative writing. But, you know, I am, you know, very aware of, you know, my sociological status, my presence. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, from where I'm from, it just, you're constantly made aware of it. And then, you know, you get into the sort of work I've gone into, social justice stuff. It's just kind of like you just learn more stuff. So one thing that I've always been curious about in that respect, you know, to our social constructs, our social reality, what it means to, you know, be someone, to be a race, to be a gender, or is that in the third, to have money. What does that look like in terms of our language? And yeah, that was sort of it, because we use our words so like freely and carelessly from time to time, and you know they're very powerful, you know, on our minds. So to read Wittgenstein, he opened up a whole new door and a whole new way of looking at words, looking at the way words are connected to the mind. Yeah, you know, and I've always just had that fascination for words, you know, so yeah, it was Wittgenstein. I'm kind of obsessed right now, you know what I mean? My guy Ludwig. Yeah.
So how would you describe the city of Oxford to people who have never been there?
Wow. It's very old, but very quaint's not the right word. It can be different things on a different day. But most of the time, I think you head downtown. It's like I think High Street, right? It's bustling. The buses everywhere. People, you know, in and out of cafes, at the little tables, you know, journaling, smoking cigarettes, and you know, very different culture out there.
Right.
And you know, I think the sights are very beautiful. The churches. The cathedrals, I think those are the same thing. You know, Christ Church was, I snuck in there once. You know, I'm gone now, so they can't do anything about it. But, you know, they have a lovely, you know, setting. And one thing I really appreciated that was different was sort of the blend of like urban, but I think a natural environment. You know, I could walk down a city block forever how long, and eventually there'll be a little entrance to a park. And you know, coming from more or less like big cities, you know, there was just not as much nature, I guess, you know, and I found that because the city stuff can get a little stressful, the school stuff can get a little stressful, and when I went out to London, you know, it was even like a little more hectic, less hectic than New York, which I appreciated, but it was still nice to be able to just like kind of sneak away and everything was just silent for a moment.
Yeah, you don't have to walk too far in Oxford to get to the countryside. Did you explore like Portmeadow and places like that?
Yeah. It was right. You know, you take a 20-30 minute walk, you know what I'm saying? You can take the bus, go on a picnic with some friends. I found myself having a lot more free time than I think most people expected, than I expected. You know what I mean? So yeah.
So what was a normal day like for you?
So granted, I'm like a very regimented individual.
Sure.
People think I'm a little crazy, and I don't think that's wrong. But you know, I wake up very early, get my breakfast, go to work. You know, lunch break, do more work. Around like 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm done for the day, and then the day is my own. You know what I mean? Do whatever I want, go hang out with friends, go to the beach. That's really my day in 2 parts. And I try to keep it that way, just because without that structure, stuff is like flying off the rails, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was like my typical day at Oxford, you know, but I'm always having contact with people, you know, always. That was the other thing, you know, you're never at a lack of conversation at Oxford. The amount of people with interesting things to tell you is incredible. You'd be 5 feet away from like an astrophysicist or something, you know what I mean, at any given point. So
Yeah, so I actually, when I was an undergrad, I was lucky enough to spend my junior year abroad in Oxford, and everything that you're saying is resonating with me. I mean, it's how I remember it too, and I just remember having these kinds of experiences where it's like a year ago, I'd never think I would be right here, whether it was competitively rowing on the river, whether it was going to a performance at a 17th century theater built by Christopher Wren, or having a pint at a bar stool where J.R.R. Tolkien used to sit. You know, there were just all of these things where it's like, never in a million years would I think I'd be here. Did you have experiences like that where you just had to stop and say like, wow?
Yeah, I think I think I sat on the same stool as President Clinton.
At the Turf Tavern?
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. I don't think I did. But, it's one of those things where it's like you have to really sit back and admire the history. There'd be different points in time where, you're kind of just walking and then you stop and you look up and it's like, holy crap. This thing is like 2,000 years old.
Providence College alums will be well familiar with the sound of lawn maintenance going on in the background. Those are the leaf blowers. It's their first appearance of the fall. So pardon the white noise, but we will press on. So did you travel at all around the UK or around Europe while you were there? I know you said you got to London. What was London like?
So unfortunately, I didn't get to travel too much. I really only got to London. I was very... I had travel plans to go to the continent. They went awry. Certain things with certain people fell out and whatnot. And then eventually just got to London. We kind of got this 5-week break in between our 2 terms. And I really just kind of hunkered down and finished writing my book. I'd been working on it for 2 years, and I'm like, I have all this free time, kind of all this money people gave me to come here to just live, you know what I mean? So that's what I really did for those 5 weeks. But a lot of it was, I think, just when I did go out to London, I visited PC students doing, the Civ in London, that's what it was. People doing Civ in London. I had some friends doing Civ in London, so went out there, went to Camden Town or whatever. Forgot what these places are called. But it was great. I really liked it too. It was way cleaner than the New York subway, and I really appreciated that. But yeah, for the most part, I think I was in Oxford, and I was just kind of hanging out with Oxford people.
Right.
Eventually, I think I should say I was with locals, you know what I mean, a lot of the time. So I kind of really got to know what life was like for some people in the UK, you know what I mean, and for me that was really rich and really interesting. I found a lot of my friends, the close ones, ended up being kind of just like me in America, first generation immigrants, but just in another country and from another country, you know what I mean. But the city life is so similar, and all the shenanigans us young men in those communities kind of get up to is all similar. So it was a lot of camaraderie, a lot of getting to know. I picked up a lot of UK slang. You know what I'm saying? That was my favorite part. Learning how to talk like the roadmen or whatever.
Yeah. So you just mentioned your book. You said you've been working on it for 2 years. You've recently finished it. It's a book of short fiction, and you're in the process of trying to publish it. Tell us a little bit more about this project.
Yeah. So I actually got it started here at PC. It's been a dream of mine to write a book for a long time. I told a mentor of mine here, he was a former dean, so I think I'll write a book when I'm 27. And he was like, why are you going to wait till you're 27? That's a dumb idea. Just start right now. And that's what I did. So it was a long process. I had to figure out the story. I think that was the first part. But once I kind of got a good idea going, it was going. The story is about sort of young men from my neighborhood and how we come to be men. Sort of giving a masculine perspective to life. I think not that that's lacking in our culture at the moment, but it's a weird time to be alive, just in general. But yeah.
So masculinity, coming of age, these are themes that you like to explore in your writing. What else do you like to explore in your writing?
So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of philosophy, a lot of sort of existential questions. Every character is sort of going through some sort of existential crisis, whether it's a crisis of faith, a crisis of purpose, a crisis of identity. You know what I mean? So a lot of that stuff. And then sort of the world in the background, I think, is really key, because it's a blend between an anthology and a novel, I guess, because it's a collection of short stories, but it all takes place in one specific setting, and there's one overarching theme and purpose. It's filled with biblical reference, ancient Greek references, Roman references. I was feeling my PC education coming through for a moment. I think a lot of it, but I grew up in a in a very religious context, despite a less religious perspective in my adult life, I think. But you can't shake that stuff. So
right.
yeah.
So you were kind of getting at this a little bit, but say a little bit more about how philosophy influences your work as a creative writer, but also vice versa, how creative writing influences your work as a philosopher.
Yeah. Oh crap. This is something I'm still trying to figure out, dude. Because it's weird. Philosophy is life. In that, every decision you make, we don't really, like, philosophy is such kind of an ambiguous word in this sense that everything everybody does is under the operation of some sort of philosophy. When I do this, it's because I believe that, you know what I mean? So when I write this, it's because I believe that, you know what I mean? Or I'm questioning this, I guess. Fiction is kind of like, it's like a simulation for philosophy. You kind of get some characters, you get a setting, you get an idea, and you run them through the simulation, and you don't really know the outcome until you write it.
Right.
You know what I mean? But then you kind of like, so this is what happens when we do this, you know what I mean? Or when we live life this way, you know what I mean? When we engage in stoicism, or we engage in, nihilism or something like that, you know what I mean? But I think fiction plays into the philosophy, and particularly the language. You put words like pictures, you know what I'm saying? You put words together, you conjure certain pictures in people's minds, and there's sort of like a whole section of philosophy dedicated to that. Wittgenstein and his sort of remarks on language and mind and whatnot, you know what I mean? So it's still unclear to me totally, you know what I mean? I think that's part of the journey right now, is trying to figure out kind of how the two things connect. But I think also fiction just makes philosophy more digestible. A lot of philosophers don't know how to write. They're terrible writers. I get really bored reading some of these guys, you know what I mean? And I kind of just want the bullet points, even though, there's importance to the nuance, there's no denying that. But yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like in your work, it sounds like your creative writing really kind of gives space to explore, what you're thinking about philosophically. But it also sounds like out of your creative writing, out of that kind of experimental, liminal space comes new philosophical ideas.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm not going to say definitely, but sort of. Because it's weird. You never really get answers in philosophy, and that's because you never really get answers in life,
right?
You know what I mean? And that's why, like, I don't know, no one book is kind of get the answer. There's something else to write, you know what I mean? Something else to think about. It's endless.
So back at college, back at Providence College, before going abroad and since, even though you've only been back, as we're recording, it is the beginning of the second week of school. But what kind of activities have you been involved in, or are you getting involved in this year?
So really focusing on BOW, Believers of Words. I'm the president this year, so trying to uplift the club and have some good events, have some collaborations with some of the departments. Right now we're planning on doing an event with, I'm waiting on some contact, but I'm trying to get together an event for poetry and philosophy. We're putting together an event with American Studies and creative writing, and we're going to do some workshop series next semester. We're going to be organizing that, and that's sort of the brunt of it, and then obviously I got to write query letters, cover letters, get these to publishers, to agents, and I think it's a very good book, I'll be honest with you. I hope it doesn't take long to get that going, but also grad apps. I'm currently applying to grad school, and that's another hassle, so yeah.
So do you want to, for grad school, are you interested in pursuing more like an MA in philosophy, or like a creative writing degree, like an MFA? What are you interested in doing in grad school?
So earnestly, I'm trying to go get my PhD.
Really? Right to a PhD?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I said, I figured out early on kind of what I wanted to do. And more or less like the gist. If I could kind of like teach and then write, that's a fantastic job, and that's a wonderful occupation. That's kind of what professors do. You know what I mean? So I'm like, all right, cool. kind of be a professor. And also, when you're a professor, you are in a position to have more resources, have a little more authority. I know I have some professors on campus who, use their positions in sort of different social activism causes and things like that, or they get involved in the community in various capacities. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the PhD route and why I want to do it.
Well, Daniel, best wishes with that. I mean, that's a rigorous path, but it sounds like you're well cut out for it. So, absolutely, best wishes with your future, with your senior year. First of all, I mean, you've got this year ahead of you, but then with grad school after that, and we wish you great success with those and in your career. So, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. This has been great.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Subscribe to the Providence College podcast in all the usual places, including iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, as well as your smart speaker. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Thanks for listening, and go Friars.